Hello, I'm Gabby. Welcome to another episode of the Happier Life Project, brought to you by mental health and wellness app My Possible Self in partnership with the Priory Healthcare. Mindfulness meditation is a practice that teaches you to slow down your thoughts, let go of negativity, and calm both your mind and your body. It combines meditation with the practice of mindfulness, which can be defined as a mental state that involves being focused on the present. Techniques can vary, but in general, mindfulness meditation involves deep breathing and awareness of your body and your mind. Now, for me personally, I really struggle with this. I want to get to that place of tranquility with myself, but the traffic in my head often overrides and pulls me away from just being. And I know I'm not alone with this problem. So today on the show, we have a fantastic mindfulness meditation teacher who is going to dispel the misconceptions, explain the science and meaning behind the practice, advise us on how to make the most out of mindfulness meditation, and please do stay until the end of this episode as he leads us through a gorgeous short practice that definitely did have me in a much calmer headspace. So, should we meet him? Ready to find a healthier, happier you? Let's get started. Welcome, Andrew Swiney, to the Happier Life Project, founder of Mynd. And today we're talking all about mindfulness meditation. So thank you for being here, first of all.
No worries. Thank you for having me.
You've been practicing mindfulness meditation for the last 10 years. Your journey began when you were researching for some much needed relief. You were suffering from severe anxiety. 10 years ago, mindfulness meditation, never mind mindfulness meditation together, that was not so much of a thing. So how did you find it, especially when technology wasn't what it is today?
So I actually started kind of my journey I went to my local town. That was my first kind of start into it. And at the Inperson, yeah. And that was kind of an interesting one because it was a mindfulness practice, but it kind of combined a couple of other elements as well. But what I got out of it was just a break from my anxiety. Just that I felt like there was a real, a pause from, my anxious thoughts. But that was just a bit of a kickstart. But what I wanted to find was something that could be more regular, and something that could perhaps be quite short, and also something more in the comfort of my own home. Because at that moment, I really struggled to leave the house. I struggled to see people. I really pushed myself to go to that class. So that was probably one thing. But for kind of like something that felt more regular, I actually started by using Headspace. And that was at the beginning beginning of its time.
Right.
And it was amazing because it was just gave me 10 minutes each day. And so that's how it started, was that sort of put my headphones in, sit in a comfortable chair and start with the introduction course or whatever it was at the time, and then going into kind of a short practice that really helped me.
So did this happen from your first class? So you were immediately hooked when you went to the in-person event, and then you wanted to explore it more and then got onto like doing it, digitally. Was it just the one in-person class that did it for you?
Yeah, I think it was a little kickstart, as sort of said. I think it just gave me, I think probably if I look back on it, it was probably the fact that I wanted something to feel like I could calm my mind, my anxious thoughts, and doing something like that. I was recommended meditation. And so I just decided to think, well, look, give it a go. It was quite a long session. I remember it was like a 45 minutes to an hour. And actually, I think I found if I remember correctly, I think I pretty much fell asleep in the session, which is kind of the opposite to mindfulness. But for the meditation itself and the concept of just sitting and being in that moment just allowed me just to have a bit of a pause, which was really important. So that I think it was like a little bit of a light kind of kick. And then I read a bit about it, about sort of meditation, and looked more into mindfulness meditation. And then that's when I started to do it. So listening to it.
Going back to this being in person, for me personally, in terms of practicing mindfulness or meditation and even yoga, I do find in-person classes, there's just something, I don't know if it's the community or maybe it's being in the room with the teacher, that I really find, I could imagine myself being able to do an hour meditation in a class with a great instructor. It seems easier I think, to get into the moment when you're in the room versus when you're at home, and it's easy to get distracted.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, because I think when you're at home doing it, your earphones on or whatever it might be, you've got generally like a guided session, which is great. But I think, and this is what I've noticed with Mind and all that, is that having someone there and kind of the feedback I've been given quite a bit is actually about that. It's about being there with somebody face to face, giving a guided session, but also quite an important part as well is being able to develop your practice to ask any questions at the end. So that's been an interesting response. I mean, I think I was kind of fortunate, but I think I was motivated with it somehow through that way. But I do feel that guided sessions have significant advantages, I think, in a way that it can help create a habit. It can help allow you to develop your practice as well by just, asking questions which people may stop. It's an opportunity in which people may stop after that practice, because if they're not able to ask any questions and go, oh, my mind was whirring away and I was so busy and I got a little bit out of that, but actually I'm not going to do it again. But if you can ask those questions in the end and get some response that allows you to, or gives you a want to practice, then I think that's really important as well.
Really good point. I suppose on the flip side, and you said on your website that you started initially practicing for 10 minutes a day, and you wouldn't make the effort to go to an in-person class to do 10 minutes a day. And that's, I suppose, when it can become a habit, a daily practice. Everybody can set aside 10 minutes. You noticed a positive change quite quickly. What happened? What did you notice?
I suppose what I just started to notice that there was a bit more of a pause from my thoughts. So when I was being able to step back from them, and that was a really important part, was that when I just noticed that happening and noticing that thoughts are thoughts and they can't harm me. And when I was able to kind of notice that a bit more and through my practice, and that's what mindfulness, especially even just a short 10 minutes as you kind of go through, each week, was that became even more obvious. And so I think once I was able to establish that and see that and then bring it back down to, the focus point, then I think that was kind of where I saw the change and saw, right, this is helping, this is happening, this is great. That was a big part.
So then how did you continue to grow your practice and then decide that this is something that you wanted to do to teach and to help others?
By growing it, it kind of just became a habit. I think I moved it on to about 15 minutes and when I could, I moved it on to perhaps about 20. So I think developing it probably was just with length of time. And it didn't actually really play a part of my life until probably about 7 or 8 years later, where I started introducing mindfulness. I was a teacher in a school, and I just started introducing mindfulness to children, and that was the turning point where I wanted to turn my passion and enjoyment of mindfulness into actually something that was more.
And before we go into that, I'm curious, going from 10 minutes a day to 15 minutes a day and then 20 minutes a day, did you do that because you just loved that carved out time for you and it made you feel so much better? Did you extend it more because the after effects were longer if you practiced for longer?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Kind of yes, in all of them really. I think you notice when you're feeling the benefits even throughout the practice that you kind of want to stay with it even longer. So you continue that practice itself. And I had more time back then as well, so it helped. And yeah, I mean, if you notice people who do mindfulness retreats, that you look at people who are able to add lots of a longer mindfulness practice into their day, you will see more of the benefits if you're able to practice for longer periods of time. But it doesn't mean you can't still reap some of the incredible benefits you get from mindfulness from just doing shorter practices. And also, it's much better to be doing, I believe, 10 to 15-minute practices each day rather than for some people perhaps doing 2 hours of mindfulness a week, if that makes sense. It's kind of like for me, that just, it made sense to do it more of a kind of to create that habit, which is just so important with mindfulness.
Okay, well, let's touch upon your company, Mynd. So this came into fruition because you were a school teacher. And is this how the sort of the idea was born, because you started integrating it into school and then you took it from there? And I believe you work with businesses now and offices as well.
Yeah, so it started during the pandemic, and I started to introduce meditation classes in the morning. So, I started to see that, first of all, staff wellbeing was shot, and children's wellbeing was really, it was not good at all. And you had kids turning up for form time in the morning, screens are blank, things like that, where, they don't want to be seen. It just wasn't in a good place. And I thought, well, look, I practice mindfulness. I can see the benefits of it. Let's bring it in for like a 10-minute session, 2 or 3 times a week. And then from there, I actually did my first course, which was with a company called Mindfulness in Schools Project. That's when it kind of really started to roll with the fact that that's what I wanted to do, because the course itself made mindfulness for children incredibly relevant, incredibly interesting. And then I just started to introduce that as well during the remote learning, and kids seem to really enjoy it.
I mean, trying to hold a child's attention at the best of times is quite challenging. Yourself being a teacher. So what was the reaction like of, they're used to seeing you in leading them in one way, and then here you are doing something very different in a holistic way, where I just feel like kids are getting more and more distracted because they're bombarded with technology, and it's the swipe generation, right? Yeah. So attention span is very short.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point. Like I said, I think what was lucky was the relevance of this course. So it taught a lot about like role models. So, the amount of celebrities or people that do it now in their life was able to really connect with a lot of the children, and just also kind of like starting to get children engaged with the mind and how it works, and kind of a bit the science behind it as well. And I think like anything with children, from being a teacher as well, is like, get onto the practical stuff, because once you get into the practical stuff as much as possible, that's when the majority of them are engaged.
That's amazing. Well, let's start at the very simplest level of the theme of today's episode. What is mindfulness meditation? How does it work?
So I think in the simplest form, I kind of describe it as this. So physically, we're always here, but our mind a lot of the time is either in the future or the past. And mindfulness is allowing our mind, like our body, to be in the present moment. I think another lovely way of describing is actually through the kind of founder of mindfulness, who is Professor John Kabat-Zinn. He brought it across from Buddhist traditions and scientific findings, and he describes it as being alive and knowing it. So that doesn't have to be specifically a formal practice. It can be out going for a walk and you're noticing the sound of the birds in the trees, or the sensation of your feet on the floor. When we eat, noticing the taste of our food. We might notice the first mouthful, but it's gone. We've lost in thought. We're on our phone, whatever it might be. Same with drinking, same with cooking, same with listening. There's so many aspects of mindfulness that can be just simply put into our lives. And it's very much down to choice.
So it's quite sensory.
Yeah, it is. A lot of it is. So the main kind of, I think we're looking at the main kind of anchor points, as you kind of call them, are like the grounding sensation of the feet, the breath. You do body scan practices, you're looking through the body, but there's also you then using your hearing, your smell, your taste. Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it, which is kind of like the sensory element. Yeah.
Yeah, we're all familiar with, it's especially since the pandemic, mindfulness and meditation is two words that get used a lot. So when you're putting the two together, like you're saying with mindfulness, it's about observation and sensory. And then we know like meditation is to get you in this kind of state of Zen. So how would you kind of summarize what mindfulness meditation is together?
Yeah, so I think the interesting thing is like, I kind of look at it as being like mindfulness is like if you have an umbrella and at the top of the umbrella is mindfulness. And then the spokes, I think you call them, or the tips of the umbrella are you've then got meditation being one. You then can have walking, eating, drinking, listening. They can be all different ones. Now, the meditation part itself is kind of more of I probably see it as a sort of more of a formal practice, perhaps. So that being a sitting breathing practice, or like I said, a body scan practice. It's more of like if I'm sitting right now and we're doing a practice, it's kind of being in that state for perhaps 5, 10, 15 minutes. And the other little spokes or tips could probably be seen more as like mindful moments, but the meditation part is more kind of just being in the here and now for perhaps a longer period of time.
So what are some of the big benefits that we can experience by making mindfulness meditation a habit?
Yeah, so I'd say like the biggest benefits are reduce stress and anxiety, improve focus and productivity. It can help improve our decision making, confidence, resilience. It can also help. It can really significantly help our sleep as well. When our mind is whirring away, perhaps like 2 or 3 in the morning, like if we're able to practice mindfulness prior, or even can do a session effectively there in bed, that can really help. And then also there's been big studies on pain and also mild depression as well. So it's interesting because actual evidence papers, I think there was just over 100 in 2010 on mindfulness. I think last year, it was over 1,200 evidence paper in that single year about the benefits of mindfulness with different areas. So there are serious studies going on about how it can help in many different areas.
And how's your anxiety now?
How's mine? So I still have anxiety, but I think it's very much based on, the difference between where I was 10 years ago to where I am now is crazy. It's so different. I struggled to leave the house. I struggled to meet up with people. I had such a difficult, challenging situation. And whereas now I'm able to manage it. So it's a management tool. And I think, that's a really important part of mindfulness. I think it's not a cure. It's none of these things. It's a management process in which you can see your thoughts, and it becomes bring it back down to whatever the focus might be. And doing this on a regular basis just can help you become calmer and clearer and what for me helped me make my life feel more meaningful and purposeful, which is a big part as well.
I want to go back to some of those benefits you mentioned, and I'd been sort of looking online as well, including self-control, objectivity, effect tolerance, enhanced flexibility, equanimity, improved concentration and mental clarity, emotional intelligence, the ability to relate to others and oneself with kindness, acceptance and compassion. I mean, all of this sounds absolutely amazing, but I'm still, and I'm saying this because I know I'm not the only one, and I've had this chat with many of my friends, being still and being present. How can that be so hugely transformational? Because I'm still I've just not connected with it in the same way I have like my yoga, but I really want to, but I just find it really, really challenging to get into that place where I can quieten the mind.
I think the important part is sort of in seeing it very much as a skill that needs to be practiced. And I think to do that, you just need to be, I think, wary of, I think there's much perceived thought about sitting still and what's that going to do for me, but it can only be seen from practice. So That might be that if we're talking about kindness, compassion, all of these things, they come from practice. And I think another thing is looking at it as, with mindfulness, you learn to respond rather than react. So we're talking about compassion, kindness, all of these things. A lot of reactions come from those impulsive situations. And that might be through, I don't know, an argument, let's just say, and someone has, through friendships, and you're just having a conversation, it turns into an argument, you snap back, and it turns into a full-blown thing. What mindfulness can allow you to do is step back, notice, and respond. So it allows you to come in with it with more empathy and more compassion. So you can kind of put some water on the fire from the argument by just responding in that way. So I think, the only way anyone's going to probably be able to really see what mindfulness can bring is just through that practice element.
I think, like anything as well, it's about finding the right guide, perhaps, that can sort of walk you through it or talk you through it and get you into that place. I mean, what to you makes a good mindfulness teacher?
Okay, so if I can say this, then that helps, because then it links with something else. But I started because Andy Puddicombe found it. His voice during the meditations, I found incredibly calming and incredibly easy to understand. So for me, that's a really important part. So when I guide sessions, and I'm not saying I'm the perfect guide at all, but what I try and make sure is that I want to normalize my meditation and mindfulness specifically. I think that's a big part for me, was to take away perhaps some of the spiritual element and making it more for a normal situation in people's lives. So that was important, but also a voice that perhaps can, a nice calm voice.
I know exactly
let's put it like that.
Yeah. It's funny you should say that, because I spent some time in America, and a couple of like my friends, I remember this conversation because we just triggered the memory that we were talking about like meditation and guides, and I can't even remember what platform we were talking about at the time, but it was one where there was many different teachers, if you will. And we were just laughing at some of them. They were so like, they put echo on the voice, and it's like you're going into this thing, and it was so fake and distracting. And then, or if you've got a voice that might grate, shall we say, it's just that is a huge, that makes a lot of sense to me. You do need a good voice.
And I think it's that sort of, not actually, again, you don't need to change your voice. I think that's the big one. Well, again, similar to you saying, I remember a situation where I think it was a meditation class or something like that, and the lady had a really lovely normal voice, and then got into the meditation, and it sort of went, ooh, like I think it's like Dory from Finding Nemo, up and down, and I was like, okay, and I know the element of mindfulness just to noticing things, but I think when you're just learning it, and also it's time for you, self-care, it's important. You just want to be in a nice calm state and with a nice calm guide. So that is important, I think.
Yeah, not somebody who's like, I don't know, like trying to hypnotize you or something. I've come across that quite a lot. Okay, let's talk about the environment that we practice in. What's the ideal environment? Because I know, going back to your company, you go into schools and offices, and so it's not necessarily where you have to carve out a quiet sort of space in your own home, but although that's probably the best scenario.
Okay, so I'd probably say yes for, again, the kind of beginner, for someone who's learning mindfulness. But again, an important part of mindfulness is that noticing element. So if you're able to do it on a train or a bus, I don't know, on a bench in a busy street, a big part of it is actually the noticing the sound. So, a big part of thinking is judgment. So when we're perhaps doing practice, we're closing our eyes and we're noticing people talking, or you can actually perhaps even notice a proper conversation that someone's happening. And then what happens with that is that your mind goes on to a conversational thought itself, which is obviously something you can then notice and bring back down to your breath. So it actually can, in some respects, like enhance your practice by doing it in a busy environment. you see that there's a really, really great YouTube, I think, video of a monk walking down a really, really busy street. And he's got, I think it's a singing bowl, and he's just chiming it. And you've got all of these people rushing past him, and he's just doing a meditation practice. And it's just like a really interesting way of being like, okay, yes, he's probably practicing it for a long, long time. But that's why I say, I think in the sort of simplest ways, like if you want to learn it and do it for the first time, an immersive environment you can find, quiet environment is great. But then, do whatever once you start really getting the hang of it.
And to build that habit, is time of day important, and the same time of day every day? Like, as in, when you brush your teeth in the morning and at night, like, is that recommended, or do you just do it when you can or you feel inclined to?
I would say, like, each person is obviously different when they can practice and when they prefer to practice it. However, I think habit is important. It's like anything. Like, if you're going to start any new regime up, practice up, it might be fitness, it might be diet, it's important you stick with habit. But with mindfulness being a meditation, I would say try and stick with it. Morning and lunch times are kind of like the best sort of times for me. I prefer probably doing it like about 8 in the morning. It's a kind of that's just personal preference, because what that allows you to do is kind of sets yourself up really well for the day. So that's my personal preference. The afternoons, what can happen with the afternoons, I think a lot of the time, is that we can start to really notice and feel tired. So when we're doing a practice and we start to feel quite tired, and then you can fall asleep, and actually that's not really what you want to be doing during practice. You're starting to notice your thoughts, and when you sort of fall asleep, then the session's kind of over in itself. So if you have time in the morning, if you have a lunch break or coffee break, I'd recommend that morning to lunchtime.
That's really interesting, because I would lean towards doing it at nighttime to calm myself down and my thoughts down, to help me sleep better. But actually, maybe that's not the best time. Maybe that's why I struggle with it. Maybe I should try in the morning.
And you're not the only one, because I have this conversation with quite a few people who say, look, I've been doing mindfulness for, I've been trying for quite a while. I'm new to it, etc. And and I'm like, what time do you do your practice? And normally when I get back from work, and that is the time when your body is wanting to rest. It's wanting to, it's had a busy day. And with mindfulness, obviously it can help calm the mind, but what it can also do is really just put you into a sleep state, which is when you can't really even focus, on your thoughts. You can bring it back down. You're just wanting to fall asleep effectively. So doing in the morning is what enables you to feel focused. It's all these elements of focus, and obviously with a calm way, feeling energized. That's a kind of, I would say that's the best time.
Why do you think so many people struggle with mindfulness meditation? I mean, the chatty brain, looping thoughts, ruminating, the constant stream of stress, they're all major hurdles that we have to, I guess, jump over to be able to get into this, again, peaceful, calm, present position. Have you got any advice on what we can do to help with these obstacles in terms of quieting the mind? And getting in, because it's all about being present, isn't it? But I think that's probably the number one challenge people approaching this come up against, is like they're thinking about that argument they had with their co-worker. What are they going to make for tea for the kids, or all these different things that their mind is.
I think the most important thing is always going to practice with a non-striving mindset and a beginner's mind as well. So every single time, this is for the most advanced mindfulness practitioners, is to always go in with beginner's mind. Because if you're already going in with a mindset of being like, I want to be relaxed, I want to be calmer, I want to be, more focused, whatever it might be, you're already starting that pattern of thinking, which is kind of only going to stop you getting as far as you want to in a practice. And if you can go with a beginner's mind, then you're open to the situation, whatever arises in the mind. If you get caught up in thinking, just bring it back down to the focus point. I would always just say the important part is to always go in with that approach and get much more out of it.
Oh, that's such good advice. Why is the breath and focusing on the breath so crucial when it comes to mindfulness meditation?
Well, because the breath is always there. It's, constantly present. And the flow of our breath as well. Well, it's one of the easier things to concentrate on. It's a movement in our body that we can just bring our attention to. And you have anchor points in your body during mindfulness practice, and your breath is one, your feet are the other. But I think the breath is kind of always seen as the more popular one, I say, just because of its movement.
Acceptance for yourself, for a situation, for how you feel about others. This is obviously the dream. Can mindfulness meditation really bring us to that place?
Yes, in some respects. Yeah, I think,
Is it a loaded question?
It's quite a big one. It's a big one to think about. But I think if you look at probably from many, expert practitioners around the world, and, you look at people who can sort of see it in a different light, that there'd be a lot more peace and harmony, because again, I think I talked about that slight sort of what the benefits bring with it, that compassion, that kindness, that element of understanding with empathy. This is what all comes from practicing mindfulness. So if everyone's got bundles of that, then they're going to feel better about themselves, which in turn is going to make the world a better place as well. So I'd like to say it would bring more peace to the world for sure. It's just building that habit in.
Well, a good place to start is by going to the My Possible Self app, because you've recorded some videos for us.
Yeah.
The themes you cover include managing anxiety and stress, focus and productivity, confidence, resilience, and sleep. So that's a pretty good place to start. But we'll plug your business too, because I've noticed that you can join your website and then you offer, I'm sure, a whole bank more practices and exercises. So that's www.mind.uk.
That's it. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. I think to wrap this up, let's practice what you preach. You're going to take us through a short mindfulness meditation exercise right now.
Absolutely. So I think the most important part is always, when we're doing a practice, is to get yourself into a comfortable position. So if we are doing a sitting, just making sure your posture is nice and straight. And if you're lying down, and obviously just making sure that you've got a cushion behind your head. So it can be done in any sort of position. I'm going to be doing a sitting. I normally do it sitting because it just allows me to straighten my body more.
Eyes opened or closed?
Yeah, so that, again, you can either lower your gaze or you can close your eyes. I close my eyes during it just because it allows me to just focus more on my anchor point. But what we're just going to do is we're just going to start the practice either with your eyes closed or lowering your gaze. I'm just going to start by bringing your attention to sensation of your feet on the floor. So just noticing the sensation of your feet pressed either inside your shoes, or perhaps directly onto the floor itself. And now I invite you to bring your attention up towards the sensation of the breath in the stomach area. You're not trying to change the rhythm of your breath, just noticing a natural inhalation and exhalation of the breath. You may notice it more in the lower part of the stomach area, or perhaps more up towards your chest. Wherever you feel it the most, just bringing your attention to that area. If your mind wanders off into thinking, and that's absolutely fine. That's what minds like to do. They like to wander. But just notice that your mind has been caught up in thinking, and gently bring your attention back down to the sensation of the breath. Just letting thoughts come and go like clouds in the sky. But if you just notice that your mind has been caught up in a thought, trying to resist or hold on to the thought itself, but just notice. And in that moment, letting go and bringing your attention back down to the inhalation and exhalation of the breath. And now I invite you to bring your attention back down to your feet. The grounding sensation of either the soles of your feet or perhaps the heels of your feet pressed against the floor. And bring your attention to the sensation of your body on the seat, on the floor. Perhaps noticing the weight of your body pressed on the seat or floor. Maybe noticing more on one side than the other. And perhaps exactly the same on both sides. Just noticing the pressure. And then just bringing your attention to your hands and your arms. Perhaps just noticing where these are placed at this moment. And when you're ready, just going to open your eyes or bring your gaze back up into the space, taking your time to do so. Just perhaps having a light stretch if you feel like doing so as well. Thank you.
I didn't want to open my eyes.
It's the time of day. Yeah.
Oh, that was amazing. Thank you.
That was a very short one. And I think what I always try and sort of say as well is that the great thing about mindfulness, more than anything, is the fact that you don't need to get change for it. I love yoga and all those other things, but the great thing is you can just do it sitting where you are in that moment and bring your attention to your feet, your breath. And that real importance of just noticing when your mind has been caught up in thinking, to then just very gently bring your attention back down to wherever it may be.
I think just you switching my perception of going with no agenda, not like I'm doing this because I need to feel better about this situation or because I'm really stressed, or I really enjoyed that. And I felt like I could have gone on a lot longer. So are there lots of audio exercises on your website? Because I'm thinking of signing up after this call.
Yeah, there are. So there's lots. There's I think it's up to about 7 hours of audio and video content. So there's differences between time of day. So I think there's like a morning, evening, and lunch one, and there's also timed one. So there's a 5-minute, 10-minute, 15-minute session. I think goes on to about half an hour session. So there are lots of different content on as well.
And that's www.mindmynd.uk.
That's it.
And of course, you can see your face on the My Possible Self app doing video guides.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Andrew, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for today. Really appreciate it.
No worries. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you, Gabby.
Hello, it's Gabby back with you. How do you feel after doing that short exercise? It definitely made me feel a lot better. So thank you for making it through to the end of another episode of the Happier Life Project. And thanks again to Andrew Swiney for teaching us all about mindfulness meditation. Now, if you are suffering with your mental health, there is a crisis button on the My Possible Self app, which will signpost you to the correct information for immediate expert advice. Those of you who are listening to this on one of the podcast platforms and haven't got the My Possible Self app, if you do choose to download it, it is completely free of charge, so you don't need to worry about it costing you anything. If you found this episode helpful, make sure you subscribe and leave a review. And to find and follow us on social media, we are at My Possible Self on Instagram and Twitter, and I've been at Radio Gabby. So please do take care, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.